Hello, welcome to our very first recorded lesson. I'm going to be talking through these slides with you just to make it a little bit easier for you. This is on YouTube, so if it's convenient for you, if you want to, you can pause it, you can play it later, you can go back if you need to, you can go forward if you need to, you can listen to it on 0.25 speed or 0.75 speed. Whatever you want, right? So this week we're going to be looking at chapter 2, and it's going to be all about cells. Today is going to be a little bit of an introduction of the different types of cells, and then tomorrow we'll get into how we can see cells and all of that fun stuff. So this week is all chapter 2. It's going to go into a little bit of next week as well. Specifically in this lesson, we're going to be talking about 2.1, which is about plant and animal cells. Before we get into the descriptions or the differences between the two, let's look at the cell theory. So why is it that we are learning about cells? There's 3 parts to the cell theory. The first one being that all living things are made up of cells. So if you know plant, animals, bacteria, all of these things are living. Why do we consider it to be living? It's because they're made up of cells. A good visual for you, if you have one of those paint by number books, or if you did when you were a kid, this is essentially what we look like. If you take a look at a living thing, they're made up of different parts, different small shapes and structures all put together. The only difference, obviously, is that our cells are very, very small, which is why we can't actually see them. So if you take a look at your hand, you won't actually be able to see any of your cells because they're so small. The second part of the cell theory is that the cell is the fundamental unit of life. Why do we call it the fundamental unit of life? It's because it can still do life processes. So why do we consider cells to be living? It's because it does do things like grow and reproduce and die. So all of those components are part of the cell's life cycle, if you will. So we consider those to be life processes, which is why a cell is living. Thirdly, all cells come from other cells. So a cell does not just spontaneously appear in a place or whatever. It comes from a pre-existing cell. So those cells have to have divided or reproduced in order for these new cells to have formed. And we're going to be learning about the exact process about how this happens later on in the week. So cells do not come from non-living things. They come from pre-existing living cells. Okay, so if you take a look at living things as a whole, you can categorize them into 2 particular sections. So one being prokaryotes. You've probably never heard that word before. So it is a category of living things. The other being eukaryotes. So these 2 categories, between the 2 of them, we will cover all living things. So let's take a look at a few examples of prokaryotes. One being bacteria. So bacteria are living things. They're usually one-celled, right? So, and they're more simple. The second example being algae. If you've seen that, if you've been to lakes or rivers or whatever, and you've seen green substance, that would be algae. The second category of living things would be eukaryotes, and examples of these would be fungi or plants or animals, so anything that's a little bit more complex. So on your note package, you will see the definition for these. Prokaryotes are single-celled life forms that are more simple. Okay, so they're not complex. They don't do complex things like, for say, humans do, but they are still living. Okay, and part of this definition is that they do not have nucleus or organelles, right? So they do not have these 2 words right here. We are going to be learning about what they are, so you will be, by the end of this lesson, be able to explain what exactly a nucleus is, what exactly an organelle is. The definition for a eukaryotic cell is a little bit different. So these are complex organisms, and they're usually made up of more than one cell. Okay, they contain a nucleus and they contain organelles as well. So let's take a look at these eukaryotic cells a little bit more closely. So we learned about their definition already. They contain a nucleus, they contain an organelle. And the definition of an organelle, really quickly before we actually learn about all of the different organelles, it's just a component of a eukaryotic cell. So if you have a cell like this, just a circle, I'm just going to draw it like there are certain components of that cell that allow it to function. That is what we call or each of these things are what we call organelles. The first category that we're going to be looking at are organelles that are found in both plants and animal cells. So if you take a look at a plant cell, if you take a look at an animal cell, those cells are different, but they're still going to have both, they're both going to still have all of these different organelles. So if you're on the PowerPoint, you can just click on each of these and you should be able to go to that particular slide. Let's do this first. Okay, so this is the cell membrane. So I know this picture is a little bit confusing. It's just referring to anything that's green, so on the very, very outside of the cell. That is the cell membrane. And for each of these organelles, I've asked you to identify the function and the description. The function tells you what its job is, right? Like what's its role inside of the cell. The description is either a physical description or telling you a little bit more about that particular organelle. So together with the description and the function, you should be able to get a full understanding of that particular organelle. Okay, so the function of a cell membrane is that it encloses the cell's contents and it acts sort of like a security gate, right? So within a cell itself, you want certain things to stay in, you want certain things to go out. So within your cell, the very, very outside is what our cell membrane is going to be. If you take a look at a description, it says phospholipid bilayer with embedded proteins. So this is sort of, this picture here is a cross section of a cell membrane. So here are the two layers that you see. So this is our first one, this is our second one. There's two layers there, hence bilayer, and they're embedded with proteins. So there are things sticking or stuck within these two layers. And the purpose of these is to allow for things to go in and things to go in and go out, right? So for example, this particular structure here, so maybe a certain chemical takes its path to go this way, maybe a different chemical will use this, right? So there are different proteins within the cell to allow different things to come in, different things to go out. We don't need to know a lot of detail about it, but just know that when you go into grade 11 and grade 12, we are going to be learning about the different chemicals going in and out. Okay? Oh, sorry, I don't mean to do that. So if you go back, where'd it go? No. There we go. Sorry. I'm going to go back to this main slide here. Let's learn about the cytoplasm next. So I don't have a picture for the cytoplasm because any picture of the cell does have a picture of it. Let's just go through the description and the function. So the cytoplasm, description of it, it's a jelly-like substance, and it's just found inside of the cell, and that's where the organelles are found as well. Okay, the function of it, it physically supports each of those organelles. So imagine if you were to open up a cell, you'll find it full of this cytoplasm, and inside of the cytoplasm, you're going to find all of these different substances, organelles, stuck within them. Okay, let's go back. Let's take a look at this third one, which is the mitochondria. So the mitochondria, the description of it, it's an oval-shaped structure, and it also has two membranes. So the cell itself, right, is in a circular form, but the mitochondria is made up of two parts. So there's the outside bit, which is our outer membrane, and then our inner membrane. Our inner membrane is folded over multiple times, and that's just the structure of it. And the function of it is that it provides the cell with energy, right? So it takes glucose and it makes it into a usable energy form. So there's lots of chemical reactions going on inside of the mitochondria. And it is what we call the powerhouse of the cell. If you don't remember anything from grade 10, you will probably still remember that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It provides the cell with energy. Okay, let's move on to our nucleus. Okay, so our nucleus, the function of the nucleus is that it directs all of the activities that happen inside of the cell. How does it do this? The nucleus in and of itself is not a living thing, right? But it contains genetic material. It contains DNA. And that DNA allows for different proteins to be created, which allows for the cell to do different things, right? So because of the DNA, right, the description, there's lots of DNA in the nucleus that allows for the nucleus to tell the rest of the cell what to do. Okay, let's do Golgi body. So our Golgi body is a complex set of vesicles and folded membranes. So this structure that you see here, that is the Golgi body. What it does is that it packages and processes proteins into these different vesicles that are then transported to the very, very outside of the cell to be expelled, right? So if there are things to be released, the Golgi body packages them up pretty nicely so that the cell membrane knows these are going out to the outside. Okay, so we did the Golgi body, we did nucleus, let's do vacuole. So our vacuole, just like all of the other ones, it's found in both animals and plant cells. However, the structure of it is a little bit different for both animals and plant cells. So in an animal cell, they are very, very small structures. So if you see those purple there, I'm pretty sure that is what the vacuoles are. The function of this is pretty much the same, a little bit different in the plants, but in animals, they store nutrients, and sometimes they store waste if it needs to be released at a later time from the cell, right? So they're pretty much storage for nutrients and waste in an animal cell. Lastly, we have the endoplasmic reticulum. So this is pretty fun to say. These are usually found very close to the nucleus. So in some other pictures, you might have seen these as well. They are the folded structures that you see close to the nucleus. The description of these are a system of channels from the nucleus to the rest of the cell. And they transport materials from the nucleus to the outside and vice versa. So things from the outside going in and inside going out to the nucleus. So the endoplasmic reticulum does that. Okay, moving on. So there are two types of endoplasmic reticulum. There's a rough endoplasmic reticulum. ER just means endoplasmic reticulum. So the rough one is rough because it has ribosomes attached to it, and smooth does not have ribosomes, right? So you don't have to know too much detail about that, but just know the difference, like what the rough endoplasmic reticulum is and what the smooth endoplasmic reticulum is. Okay, moving on to, we are going to be looking at a few organelles that are only found in plant cells. So you've got 3 different ones. I've included the vacuole here just because it's different enough in the plant cell that you should know it a little bit separately. Let's click on this one. So this is the cell wall. So remember that in an animal cell, they have the cell membrane. The plant cell has that too, but it has, in addition to that, it's got a cell wall as well. Okay, so this is a structure that's found surrounding the plant cell. It's made up of cellulose, and the main function of it is to protect the plant cell, and it gives it that structural support. So this is sort of the reason why a tree can stand up and sort of hold itself, because all of those cells have a cell wall. Let's go into our vacuole. So this is a little bit different in a plant cell. The description of it is what's mainly different. In a plant cell, it's much larger. I'm pretty sure these are the big white structures, or what we call vacuoles. They're much larger, whereas in an animal cell, they were very, very small. In plants, they give structure to the plant. So they allow for the leaves and such to hold themselves. They also have the same function as in an animal cell, which is to store nutrients as well. Lastly, we've got our chloroplast. These are only found in plant cells. The description of it, they're very, very small green structures that are found in these plant cells. Their function, this is the place where photosynthesis occurs, right? So we know that plants all do photosynthesis, and they occur within the chloroplasts. The reason why plants are green is because of these chloroplasts, which are found inside of the plant cells. Okay, those are pretty much all of the organelles. Some of them in both the plants and the animal cells, some of them only in the plant cell. If you go to the next page of your note package, you will find there's 2 diagrams of a plant cell and an animal cell that needs to be filled out. I'm going to allow you to pause the video and then fill them in. or look in your textbook, the same diagram's there as well. The only reason I included these is to show you that all of these organelles exist together inside of a cell, right? So in a plant cell, that might look a little bit different than the animal cell, but they are still existing together, and they have to work together in order for a cell to function. That is pretty much it for the lesson. For homework, I'm going to ask you to do 3 questions on page 32 of your textbook. The textbook is also posted onto the classroom as well, so if you need to do that. That's pretty much it. Bye.